Remember how you loved the stories at bedtime about princesses and fairy godmothers? Well, you may want to hold on tighter to your teddy bear and keep that nightlight on, because these are not your mother's bedtime stories.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Not Your Mother's Bedtime Story, a paranormal podcast where sisters and their mother discuss and meet with guests about all things paranormal. I'm Chrissy, one of your hosts, and everyone else is here.
Colleen's here.
I'm Karen, the mom.
And Sherry's here.
So as always, we're excited to get to our guests. We have two guests today that we're excited to hear their tales. But I forgot last episode, we have all been reading the same book, I think, The Haunting on the Hill. And since our listeners might be interested in things like that, it's definitely a good read.
We have?
I have to say, I finished it.
We have been reading this book.
You haven't been reading this book?
I thought we were reading All Hallows.
Oh, you haven't read it?
Oh
man.
Yeah, that's
was
another
good.
one.
What are we supposed to be
I have
reading?
read that
I'm
one.
so confused.
Yeah. That's good.
And then we read How to Sell a Haunted House. I read that
it's
one.
It's creepy.
We didn't talk about that one.
Yeah. Oh, Sherry's out of the book club thread then. Maybe I'm
in the thread. I didn't see this one.
Oh, no, this one is really good. So it's a twist on, the haunting of Hill House, or the haunting House on Haunted Hill. Yeah.
The House on Haunted Hill.
I think the author is Elizabeth
Hill House.
Is that correct?
Hill House.
But it's,
I'm
it's
just
good.
Have to get it. I'm audible. I
think so.
And now Sherry, along with our listeners, will get to read it. It's a good read. I finished it at 3:30 in the morning in the dark, and I probably shouldn't have, because that's when it was all coming down. I couldn't sleep, and so I got up and I'm like, well, I know I only have like 20 minutes left of this book, and I didn't want to turn on a lot of lights because that wakes you up. And I'm sitting there, and we have guinea pigs that sit up in the lofty area, and they were like all really active, and they're like banging around as I'm reading this. I'm like, oh, I hope that's the guinea pigs, because it's getting scary. But yeah, it's a good read. I recommend it to our listeners if you want something spooky, and don't maybe read it at 3:30 in the morning in the dark.
Well, I will have to read it. So if anybody's out there reading it, you can, message us on our social media and let me know what you think, because I haven't started it. They skip around too much. I can't keep up. I'm reading like 3 books at once, and dang. But the How to Sell a Haunted House was pretty creepy. So that was by, who was that by?
Grady Hendrix.
And that was a little different, but I mean, when it comes to dolls and puppets and creepy clowns, you really can't go wrong with those types of things, because that's what it was. And then a creepy puppet and caca-wee-wee. Like, so if you
Oh gosh, that dumb thing. It's like, jeez. And then what did you buy? A Christmas ornament, Colleen, that
You'll
looked
have to
like
read the book to know what we're talking about. But yeah, it's definitely another creepy read.
Well, and kind of a connection to our guests, so we can make that transition. So nice segue.
Segue.
We love a good segue. So Sarah, who's married to our cousin Tim, or who we refer to as Timmy, is who introduced us to our lovely guest today. But Timmy, correct me if I'm wrong, Timmy had a severe clown collection back in the day. So.
Yeah. Or where was it?
I
his
don't
or
know,
Jim's?
but
I think it was.
It might have been Jim's, who is Tim's father. But I remember Tim had the room in the basement, and that's where all those dang clowns were. It's like you'd walk down the stairs of the basement, and this would be a huge shelf of just all of these creepy ass clowns. And it's just so. Yeah, that book kind of correlates to. In that way, but I don't know how you could sleep in a room with all of those clowns. I mean,
yeah. They even had one that they found like on the side of the road. Maybe it was more of a baby, and they call it like Dirt Baby or something like that. Colleen might remember, but I remember Dirt.
Come on, you don't pick up dirty babies off the
Dirt
side
Baby.
of the
Oh, was it the
he had Kewpie dolls,
Kewpie doll?
which are just as creepy.
Like, somebody tossed that out the window for a reason.
Yeah, Kewpie dolls. They are creepy.
That's true. That's true. We've heard enough stories about haunted objects that you don't want to be picking up dolls on the side of the road. So
We picked up a doll on the side of the road.
Gotta sage that thing.
Oh no!
And we put it in the exhibit for Halloween.
Oh, of course you did.
My
Of course you did. And this is where the problem
Yeah.
is.
Oh
right?
my God.
Was the building scared more people.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh,
Ooh, well, let's not
Yeah,
waste time.
yeah.
We'll get right
Dang.
into our guests here. We need to
That
hear
was a
these
better
stories.
that was a better segment than I thought. Well done.
So we mentioned Sarah, and again, Sarah is one of our biggest fans, and we appreciate her sending guests our way, especially these next two guests who are former coworkers of her at her time at a historical society. So I will let you two introduce yourselves and take it away.
My name is Denise Lundell, and I work at the Summit County Historical Society of Akron, Ohio. And I'm here with my friend and boss, Leanne.
Hi, I'm Leanne Neff-Hepner, and I've been at the Historical Society since 1999. And I had the pleasure of telling Sarah a story going through the house, which caused her to start to volunteer. And we said, she's not that creepy or weird. So we accepted her to volunteer here at the Historical Society. So Sarah, we love you. And I thought we might want to start talking a little bit about where we're at. We're in Akron, Ohio, and we are at the home of Akron and Summit County's founding family, the Perkins, and they have this lovely 1837 Greek Revival stone house on top of a hill. So our book is actually called At Home on the Hill. So now I'm really thinking we might need to do a play on that after hearing your podcast and your suggestions that we can have this alternative book about what happens here at the Perkinstowe Mansion. In front of the house right now, we have multiple fences because in the spring through fall, we actually have sheep on the property. And that's because the Perkins lived diagonally from John Brown, the abolitionist that's known for leading a raid at Harper's Ferry to try to end slavery in the United States in 1859. And he happened to be the shepherd of the Perkins. And that's important because you need to know the landscape about what's happening and what people are seeing here on the property. So you've got this huge stone house overlooking the city of Akron, and it's at the crossroads actually of the boundary of the United States. Previously, the Portage Path was the western boundary of the United States. So on the side where the mansion is, that was United States territory. And then on the other side where the John Brown house is located today, that was at that time called Indian territory. And so it's a very historic location, which later when the city is placed, the stagecoach route crosses that boundary. And so once Ohio is a state, right before that, then that Portage Path becomes just a trailway, but it's no longer the boundary of the United States. So it's a very interesting and historic location, and very unusual things have happened. People see, hear, and feel. So we can't wait to share some stories as we go through our Perkinstowe Mansion today. Okay, well, let me just open the door and go into the mansion. And so when I started here in 1999, this was the first historic house I'd worked in that I wasn't scared to be in. And I had my office by myself upstairs. So about 6 months after I'd been here, we were having a party in December, and I was standing at the front door with a very interesting woman who liked to share that her last name was Vondel, like fondle. So I was already like, this is going to be interesting. And at one point, after the guests had come in, she shut the door and she looked up the stairs and she said, "They like you." And I mean, all the lights are on in the house. We've got a lot of guests milling around. I look up the stairs. There's nobody on the stairs. And I just did a little double take, and she could tell I could see nothing. And she said, "Well, there's an older woman and a little boy up there, and they like you." Just guess what? Every time I'd go up their stairs, then the hair on the back of my neck did stand up after that. And this did become a very interesting place to work in. But it actually wasn't until about 6 years later, when we were having a special event, that a lot of crazy things started to happen. And then we found out they've been happening all along. It just, with the construction that was going on in the house, it was a show house. Then it, stir up some trouble. Well, I shouldn't say trouble, because everything that's been happening here has been really positive and fun. So we want to say that because we don't want guests to be afraid to come. But there is a chance that something might happen to them. Now, before I lead it on to Denise, because I know she wants to share some things about that front hallway, is I want to share that we're also located in a neighborhood that some people might affectionately call the Hood. Now, it used to be the best place in Akron,
Millionaires Row.
but at the time when you could no longer say you can't sell to certain people, then the houses went up and there was a mass exodus out of this area. And while we have lovely neighbors, a lot of things go on in this neighborhood. And so once the paranormal stories started coming out, people started begging us, can we stay overnight in the Perkinstone mansion? And we're like, no way. I'm not staying overnight in this house, not because I'm scared of what's in it, because I just don't want to get involved with what's outside it. So one of our staff members, Allison, has been known to have really terrible dreams. And so she came in one day, she's like, there's no way we are staying overnight in this house. And then she described her dream, in which, like every horror film, we chose to do something stupid, which was to sleep in front of the front door. And so we put our sleeping bags down. And she said something started to come down the stairs. She couldn't see it, but it was like this dark, ominous figure. And then the walls began to breathe, and she could actually hear it and see it. And then as this dark figure came down the stairs, there was a light down the other hallway, which is our kitchen. And she could see it, and she could tell that people were screaming, but she couldn't hear anything. And then when she looks up, the light was out in the back hallway. And as she looked around, everyone else was dead around her. So we've not stayed overnight in the Perkinstone.
Well, sorry. I again, here I am interrupting. So Leianne, let me ask you a question about that, because that seems really interesting to me. So this coworker, you said it had these vivid dreams, and she had this dream about, have you ever, what is the latest that you have been in the house?
Oh, probably 3 a.m.
Okay. So you have been there late, because what I'm wondering is if she's talking about, you said everything has been fun, everything was, kind of more lighthearted when it comes to, the paranormal. But if you were to have spent the night, it almost seems like then there could have been something a little bit more, malignant, something a little bit more, darker, if you will. I mean, and you talk about things that might happen outside, but perhaps then whatever is inside is also playing with the negativity outside that could have made it a little bit more intense. So that's why I was just wondering, 3 a.m. is pretty late. And I would say that if there was going to be something that would happen, instead of just, unless there was like the commitment, I'm staying overnight, and then there could have been, it just seems like there's a dark presence over that dream that maybe you didn't experience during the day or when you were there. But had you ever decided to spend the night or committed to being there overnight, then it could have gone in a different direction.
Well, I'm not going to disagree about that. Although we do have some interesting people that live across the street from the Perkinstone Mansion. It's actually a low-income housing structure. And we had to have one of our trees cut that used to block the view that they had of the mansion. And then after that, they would call and they would complain to the police about all the parties going on in the house and on the front porch, where they would see lights.
Okay.
And what's really interesting,
Yep.
they're leaving these voicemail messages for us. And then I would call them and I'd say, can you describe what you saw? And they described two things. One, it was either Victorian clothing, which of course they didn't know it was Victorian clothing, but I did. Or two, it was 1920s era, which is fantastic because that's the time that the Historical Society was founded. And we're actually celebrating our centennial year, 1924 to 2024. But the probably the oddest thing is they also sell dogs. So, I mean, this place is happening. So yeah, maybe they wanted to just party. So I'm going to stay positive because I'm still working here.
I've never had anything that has felt negative. One of the most profound experiences that I've had is I went into the modern kitchen and I was looking around for supplies for an event we were having that night. When we've had the angel reader, we have a medium angel reader with whom we work. When we have had her visiting in the past and she's done readings, we will have her set up in our dining room. And in addition to the chandelier, we'll also put live candles on the table. And it's the only time we allow open flame in the house. And if there is some paranormal activity, we'll notice that the chandelier lights and the candle lights or the candle flame kind of flicker back and forth and on and off at the same time. So knowing that, I went into the kitchen and turned the lights on, and I was just rooting around looking for what I wanted. And the lights in the kitchen started kind of strobing lightly. And I said to nobody that I could see, I can't help you unless you show me what you want. And from the corner of the kitchen, I heard, and I thought, a word that I probably shouldn't say on radio. And so I went over to the corner and I started pulling stuff away. Now, this was during COVID. We had nobody in the house. There were no volunteers making coffee, nothing. It was just us. And in that corner, there was a coffee maker. And not only was it plugged in, but it was on. And the carafe was sitting on that very hot plate of the coffee maker. So I removed the carafe, I turned it off, I unplugged it, and then the lights cleared up. So I thanked them, whoever they were, that they had trusted me enough to pay attention to what they were doing, and I would take care of their house. And now every time I go in the house, I greet the family. I call them the unseen family. And I greet them because I feel like I'm walking into their space. I've noticed over the years that I've been in and around the house that I'm much more comfortable now that I do that. And I think that, that episode with the knocking, it kind of cemented our relationship, if you will. And they don't mean harm, and they know that I don't mean harm.
Well, it is really interesting that you say that, because I used to tease my previous boss that they want to push her down the stairs, but they like me.
No.
So I guess I didn't think about, there have been a few things that have occurred that, we kind of laugh off. And, again, maybe it's because we work here on a regular basis. And so we don't want to think of those things. But we mentioned that a lot of stuff started happening after we had this show house in 2006. And so without telling our board, we brought in a clairvoyant, which was not the angel reader that we work with now. And as we went upstairs, she said, well, there's a lady and a man here, and they didn't like my boss at the time. And if possible, if they had enough energy, they would push her down the stairs. Now, again, this is the beginning, and we thought this was kind of funny.
She didn't.
But she didn't.
So a lot to unpack there, and I want to take a step back because I want to get back to the medium, because we need to go into that a little bit more. But and then clairvoyant, so you obviously had a lot of people come in, but Denise, okay, so I love that what you said, and you're recognizing their presence. You're saying, okay, I understand that you were here first, and I'm on your territory and everything, because we've actually had conflicting things where some folks have said that if they don't recognize it, if they don't say that I know you're here, then they feel like they don't have the power. So there's two things there. But the other thing I want to get back to, so this coffee pot was on with the empty carafe, and it's out there, it's percolating, it's doing whatever it's doing with nothing in it,
A
and it
fire.
could cause a catastrophe. Who started it? So somebody is saying, turn it off, Denise. We need to prevent this, but somebody turned it on,
right?
Or something turned it on. So is there some kind of conflicting energies? Leianne, good gracious, you're turning on empty coffee makers.
Well,
you just take the last part of it and you forget that it's
I took away the fact that there's something bad hanging out, turned the coffee pot on. But I don't even think I told Denise this, but like I've been thinking about this because we were by ourselves. I mean, basically Denise and I were the only ones here. She was downstairs in the office and I was upstairs in the office, and we're going in and out. I mean, this is when you can't have visitors, so we're putting up Christmas trees in a house that nobody can visit so they can peek in the windows. But I think in hindsight, I've just been trying to put this through my head is I think I put something on the counter, and I wonder if in putting something on the counter, I pushed those coffee cups, which then flipped the front of that coffee maker.
Possibly.
We can try to believe that. We can try to believe
that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't drink coffee, so I can't claim that one.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, it just seems like there might be something more. What you also said that this clairvoyant indicated that there was a man and a woman. So now we've heard that there's a man, a woman, and a child that someone has seen at some point. But you said they didn't have the strength to push her down the stairs. They would have if they could have. So there has to be, if something else did plug in that coffee maker, something else would have had to have the strength to at least pick up a plug and plug it into an outlet. So I think and again, I want to go back to the medium to see if there's anything more, but is there a stronger entity that would have had the ability to do that?
I don't know.
I'm not sure about that, but again, I'm a chicken. I'm the one that gives the paranormal tours, but I'm scared of the dark. So I tell everybody, if my flashlight goes out, somebody will have to sacrifice, and I'm not kidding. But that there's some other things that happened that maybe that there were some things going on, and I'm just curious about that. I'm not saying that there isn't anything here that could be kind of malicious, because when you started talking about the dining room, and then I realized it's not something you were here for, is that we had two different people. So we had a medium and our angel reader and a clairvoyant. So I'm going to go into the angel reader, but I do want to go back to the clairvoyant because there's a funny story there too. But with the angel reader, one time we were sitting around the table, and we didn't say we had a seance. We called it a realm to realm. And as Denise said, we had the candles on the table and the lights low, so that when she would talk about someone that was with somebody that came, the lights would, flare up or down. What people didn't know is we actually had remote controls at that time to turn on and off our alarm. And we're all sitting around the table, the alarm is off. And then all of a sudden it goes off, and there is no reason for it. And so I go to turn the alarm off, which is down a stairwell that leads to the basement. And Laura Lynn comes with me, and she just comes up the stairs and says, turn it off and shut the door. We're not going to deal with that tonight. So we did, it's one of those few fibs that I've told because I'm all about facts here with history. But we just said, I must have hit the button in my pocket, even though the button was in the kitchen. And I did not turn the alarm on and make that noise. So are there things here? Some people think that there could be. I mean, I've exposed where we're located historically. So there was a lot happening in the past here. And in some aspects, I think it tends to be with the fact of the energy that we bring into the house, because how much we love it. And as Denise says, she welcomes the people, lets them know that she's there. Other volunteers do that as well. And I've just gone with the fact that they like me, and I'm just going to stick with it and stay with it. But I do want to get back to that clairvoyant, because that first time when we said that, so the woman and man that were upstairs on the third floor, that's not the same woman that liked me that was on the staircase, because this woman was younger. And so as I was coming down the stairs, this is the first time I ever had this experience. I smelled chrysanthemums very strongly, which may not be significant to most people, but I grew up in a funeral home. So like that smell is very it's, you know, like, because smell, it incites memories differently than other things. So it was just the craziest thing that I've worked there for, at that point, 7 years. And this is the first time I ever smelled something like this. But shortly thereafter, the clairvoyant comes down the stairs, and at the point where I'm standing on the stairs, she looks over into another room and sees a photograph on the wall. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's the guy. So we knew that the people that she saw were actually, in this case, related to the family that had lived in the house.
So, Leianne, a question. Sorry, dang, Sherry, you keep interrupting. So I have, so going back to, so you said you smelled the chrysanthemums because you recognize the smell because you worked in a funeral home. And I feel like we're going to have to come back to that because I'm guessing that there are stories connected to that. So maybe
Oh, sure. I lived in a funeral home. Yeah.
But yeah, so we're going to have to come back to that. But
Why are so many of our guests grow up in like funeral homes and assisted living?
Yeah, we love it. But we're going to have to come back to that. And like I said, another episode.
Okay.
But when you said you had never smelled that before, you had never encountered that before. When you did, like, how did it make you feel?
You know, at first it was a little offsetting because I was like, crazy. And again, it has to do with my mind. It reminds me of death because of somebody being at the funeral home and all the flowers. It doesn't matter what you have. They end up smelling like chrysanthemums. But then after that, I decided, well, it was kind of nice to smell something. And we've smelled many things since then. And actually on our tours, as because we always do these lights out, that we will have at one point in the room where she saw the photograph, by the way, we'll have everybody turn their flashlights off and close their eyes and just observe, you know, what are they picking up from that? Because sometimes when your eyes are open, you don't always observe those smells. So it didn't scare me away. I'm still here.
Well, I just wonder if that was meant for you, is what I'm getting at. Like that was something that was meant for you. That
possibility.
That, you know, something that you would recognize, something that you would connect with. And why I asked how did it make you feel? Did it make you feel comfortable? Did it make you feel nostalgic? Or did it make you feel uncomfortable or afraid even? Because I'm thinking if it made you feel comfortable, then maybe that was more of like a peace offering. Like we like you, you're here. You know, this is something that is familiar to you and we want you to kind of recognize that.
Well, I'm going to say now I feel even better about it after listening to you.
See, and I took like the total like scientific approach. And I'm like, well, maybe it was you said from funerals. So, back 100 years ago, often they had, wakes and funerals.
Always.
Visitations right in the home. Yeah. And so I was thinking it was just a remnant of a former funeral. I didn't even go to the fact that the spirits were that
personal.
Yeah. Well, I actually like that because nobody else smelled it. And I was ahead of the group.
That's what I was going to ask too. Did anybody else smell it?
I think it was
for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm going to thank them when I go back in and appreciate that because they're like, she's out here if we don't fix this. But it is kind of freaky that a smell of a funeral home would make you feel okay. But it didn't bother me. After I realized, it didn't smell bad.
Well, I'll let you guys keep going, but I just like how respectful you are of them. And I think that's probably what they appreciate. And that's why, Denise, if something like that had happened to me, I'm such a scaredy cat too. I would have just, hightailed it out of there. But the fact that you had that presence to say, I can't help you unless you tell me what you want, versus and they knew that you love the home too. And they, I'm sure, love the home. And so you're very respectful. So I think that's probably where you get that where they like you. And
I appreciate that of them.
Someone tells me they see something and other people have seen that older woman and boy on the stairs. And I thought they were looking at the picture that we have that actually shows somebody going up the stairs, and we're happy to share that with your listeners. Then, who am I to judge because I can't see it? And so we've really been open to that factor that there are other things going on. And I think in terms of respecting the house, Denise really sets the standard for that. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that she's been there since she was a child. I mean, she grew up across the street from the historic structure.
The family had extended family and there was a large house across the street, and that's where I was born. And there was one other child in the neighborhood, and she was the daughter of the caretakers. And so when we were toddlers, and I would come over here, and she and I would play from the attic to the basement. And so I have been here for a long, long time. My class would come and visit the Perkinstone Mansion when I was in elementary school, and everybody else would be oohing and awing, and I'd be like, oh yeah, this is really interesting. I live across the street. And, I've asked the angel reader a couple times if any of the spirits remember me from when I was little, and she has never been able to substantiate that.
Well, I mean, I would say absolutely. I mean, when you're just telling that you were there as a child and the connection that you already have with the paranormal that's in that house, I would say absolutely. I don't need to be a angel reader or clairvoyant to see that. I mean, no, I mean, honestly though, I mean, because they're there.
Right.
They haven't gone anywhere. Yeah. They've been there. They're still there. For them to reach out to you, and again, saying, "Hey, Denise, help us out here. This coffee maker is on. We need to get it off because we don't want to lose the house." I mean, I would say absolutely they know who you are. They know what connection you have to the house. They know that you mean no harm to it. They know that you're there because you love it just as much as they do. I would say,
thank you.
100%.
Oh, thank you.
Well, hearing that, I think that you need to tell them how much they know you, Denise.
Oh, Lord. Yeah. So we were working on a fundraiser, and I was making gift baskets. And some of the extended Perkins family had come into town, and Leianne was touring them through the house. Well, I needed to get into her car, and I got her keys and did what I needed to do, took the keys back in, and I walked in, and suddenly I felt something in my shoe. I reached down and took my shoe off, and there was a hunk of a corn chip in my shoe. Now, the significant thing about that is that I'm highly allergic to corn. And I hadn't been around any corn, no corn chips, nothing. So then, as I had reached down and was checking the toe of my shoe, I felt something right in the front of my bra. So I, fished down there, and I pulled out more corn chip pieces. And I thought, WTF? And I just, got what I had gone in there to get and left. And I went into my office, and one of our education coordinators was in there, and I said, "You are not going to believe what just happened to me." And he would love to have something happen. He has never really experienced anything, and he talks about wants that experience. And he said shortly thereafter, he went into the kitchen and he said something out loud to, whoever about messing around with his friend Denise. And he said he felt this kind of oppressiveness that he had never felt before. And he kind of got the impression that they weren't happy being chastised for teasing me. I never eat corn.
So these corn chips, were they there?
Oh, yeah, they were there.
Okay, no, I mean like in the house, like
we
beforehand.
We did have a bag of corn chips, but they were sealed up in a plastic container.
Okay.
And they were still there?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that to me is completely bizarre. Well, first, it's bizarre that Denise, you grew up in the Midwest and you're allergic to corn.
Oh.
Bang. But yeah, that is very bizarre.
That is bizarre.
But the fact that they would have chosen that specifically.
I know.
To mess with you. That really throws me. Yeah.
It always just kind of seemed to me like just teasing. You know how teenagers just tease like they were goofing around.
Yeah, and the interesting thing I was going to share, because we talked earlier about like how late we stay here, and we've had a variety of different reporters. We've been on a variety of different television shows that they'll bring people out and creepy things happen to their cameras, battery and stuff like that never happens to them. Is the fact that people say it doesn't have to be dark at the mansion for something to happen.
Oh, right.
And so there's just constantly things going on in the house. But Denise, even though we have tons of stories and we can't talk everybody's ear off, I think we need to go through the saga of Martha.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It could really be a segment in its own, but I think it's what brings us to Sarah.
Yeah.
Potentially, is that when we had this show house in October of 2005, there were two of us in the building, Janice and myself. And Janice was representing the Junior League and I was representing the Historical Society. And we were preparing for all the different designers to come in to see the house so they could then put together their vision boards of which room they wanted to redo for the show house. So Janice took photographs of every room. So we would have a before photograph. And then, as we said, lots went on. We could tell you lots of stories about things, but just let's get to the end of the show house. And I say, well, would you share your before pictures so I can link them with during and final result images? And as I'm flipping through her memory card, and again, this is new. This is when memory cards were new for cameras. This is not real film. I'm flipping through and I go, oh, shoot, I'm in the picture. And it's because there is an image on the stairs. And I'm like, after a while, that's not me. This is crazy. Like, think how you remember things and why you remember them. But I was wearing a blue pashmina, blue shoes, and blue pants. Like, for those of you that are fashionistas, that probably wasn't cool, but I think I looked good at the time. Anyway, I remember those things and I still have them. But when you look at this image, it's all white and she looks like she's barefoot. So then that became the question, what's going on? Well, show house opens and there is a room in the back of the house we call the Alexander bedroom. It has this beautiful late Victorian furniture, which is a high bed and matching dresser with mirror. And so we actually have in that room an image of a drawing of the house where it used to be, which is ironically today's I Promise School for LeBron James.
Yeah.
The house is no longer there, but in any regard, we received the furniture after the house was to be torn down. And that room was a 1930s glam theme with all these mirrors. And the designers would come in and they'd be kind of pissed because they'd like, why'd you flip our stuff over? There's mirrors flipped over, things are moved. And we're like, So that clairvoyant that came through said, well, Martha's actually offended. There are too many mirrors for a bedroom. She doesn't like this. And so then this whole process of Martha comes to being and we start giving these tours. One of them I'm leading and one of the guys on the tour I knew had run the safety at a facility. And so I said, when we go upstairs, would you go first? I trust you. You know, of course, you always have to think, is somebody going to take something while all the lights are out? It's a historic house, for goodness sake. So anyway, he goes into the room first. And then I tell the story and we go to leave. And I ask him, I said, so were you scared? Because he was a non-believer. And he just flatly said, yes. And this is when all the guests are around him. And he waited until they left. And then he said, Leianne, I walked into that first room and a woman said, I am here. And I turned around thinking it's my wife or my friend's wife, but no, it's my guy friend. And then the person behind that was a guy. And he's like, I can't fathom why this happened. I can't explain it. But my friend and I both heard her say, I am here. So then a few years later is El Nino. And that was pretty fascinating to take people through. So within about 4 days, we took over 300 people through for paranormal tours. It's raining. It's nasty outside, but it was crazy inside. And we go into that room where the bed is that we talked about. And I'm giving a tour about 9:30. It's almost 10 o'clock at night. And I see people walking backwards towards the door to get out. And then somebody slowly raises their hand, and I stop and I look, I'm like, yeah, how can I help you? And she points over to the side of the bed at a rocker. And she says, should that be rocking?
Those dang rocking chairs every single time. Our last episode, we had some rocking chairs too. And no more rocking chairs.
That's right. We're a ban on rocking chairs. So in any regard, it was a few years later, and I was given a tour at that same time. We don't always do tours that late. And I'm talking to everybody, and out of the corner of my eye, that darn rocking chair started rocking. And I said, I'm out of here. The tour is over. And like, I was really serious. The people didn't believe me. They were like, they thought it was part of the whole thing. I mean, and that's what's really interesting about what's going on here. So shortly thereafter is when Sarah was on a tour. It was not after 9:30 because I refuse. I'm not going to do any more tours after 9:30 at night. But we were sharing how another staff member during that whole El Nino episode was giving a tour. And just in the middle of the room, somebody pulled a hair in the middle of her head. And this is a staff member that told the stories. And the stories we tell are only things that we've observed or been told from other people. So that kind of flipped her out a little bit. So when I was telling this story, when Sarah was on tour, something pulled her hair in the top of her head. And she thought for sure it was one of her children. And she turned around. So what we are finding out after we brought in the angel reader, Laura Lynn, is that Martha's making herself known. With the angel reader, Laura Lynn, often have the winter solstice. So we'll do that on the 21st or 22nd of December at night. And so she often will bring in dowsing rods. And so they were using dowsing rods in a downstairs bedroom, which also has a lot of activity. And I'm sure Denise is going to tell you about the print that she found on the bed. But in that room, they were using dowsing rods, and they were asking to try to figure out, because we finally did the research, and Martha was attached to the bed upstairs. And so I don't know why they decided to do it downstairs, but they were trying to figure out, was Martha the wife of the gentleman, Mr. Alexander, or was Martha the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Alexander? And so they asked this question using the dowsing rods. And then somebody said, well, if you're really here, then let us know. And at the same thing, like Denise, it's 3 taps on a door somewhere within that room. And then this volunteer, Mary, then continued to ask questions about another volunteer. Did they recognize this volunteer that was here all the time? Yes, they recognized it. You know, the dowsing rod said yes. Did they like that volunteer? No, they did not. So they're flipped out, and I had not been in the room. So they come and find me. And as I come to the door, then Mary asks about me, and the dowsing rods then turned and pointed to me, at which point then, do you like Leianne? Yes, they do. So that might help with some of what we're going through and figuring out who is here. But Martha definitely has a presence and does get into a variety of things. But there's so much that we could share about Martha. And I just wanted to make sure that we made that connection to Sarah so that she could share that story with you offline sometime.
We were doing a paranormal tour last October, and we had 2 different sessions. One was at 5 o'clock, and the next one was at 7. And the 7 o'clocks always sell out really fast because, it's already dark and people think that, it's going to be creepier. And this woman came into the gift shop to check in. And she said something about, well, it's only 5 o'clock and, it's still light outside. And I said, look, the inside of the house is about as dark as a tomb. And so we went in and it was dark. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but she was so creeped out by the time we were done. She could hardly wait to get out of the house. I think it might have been in the Alexander bedroom, actually. And I used to not like going into that room. It was not friendly, and I really didn't feel welcome there. And then I moved the furniture around. Well, we moved the furniture, but I redesigned the setup in the room, and we removed the picture of a man, George Todd Perkins, and it was his enormous corporate. Martha Alexander's furniture is in this bedroom, and this enormous picture of George Todd Perkins, who she would have known, it's hanging on the wall overlooking her bed. And we took that portrait out of there, and almost immediately it seemed to me like the atmosphere of the room changed. And I really think she didn't like him, staring down on her bed.
Well, I think that she's really picky about the space because we had a variety of things happen in that room before. And so she's very connected to the space. We've had variety of people see her in the space. And actually, we had a program and a teacher was visiting us, and she was just becoming more comfortable with her ability to talk to individuals of the other world. And she sat down and had a conversation with Martha because Martha was crying and she was trying to figure out what was going on. So Martha's been very attached to the furniture, and we're not exactly sure why. And she's not related to the Perkins family. So I do think that's interesting that she's taking care of the house. And so she does let it be known if she likes something or doesn't. So I think Denise is right. We have not had as much activity in that room, much to our visitors' dismay.
Sorry.
and they're not getting touched, which is too bad. But I do have to share another story just quickly because it takes you to another realm. Okay, just to whet your appetite or tease you a little bit. But it ended up in that room, but it started someplace else. So the oldest daughter of the Perkins is Anna, and she has a beautiful pineapple mahogany hand-carved bed. And so that room has a lot of activity with children in it. And we were giving a tour one evening, and then I walked across the hallway, and this high school student that was with us, it was in the summer, he was wearing shorts. He said, "Can I go back over?" Because I had shared that he can hear children, that children's voices have been captured under the bed. Shortly thereafter, he runs back into the room where we are and said, "Something touched my leg." Didn't think anything of it. Then we go into that back room and he's like, "There's still something rubbing on my leg." And just like, it really bothered him. So we decided to leave the Alexander bedroom and go downstairs. And it was probably 3 months later that we were having an event. We opened the door to the mansion and somebody walks in and said, "What's up with the cat?" We have no cat. Well, we do have cats, but they were in the office. And what we found out after we did some research, that cat that used to hang out in this office named Simon, after the founder family that lived here, Simon Perkins, Simon had died, the black cat. And so the black cat has been seen throughout the house, and even just recently here, to the extent that people will apologize that they let our cat out of the house when they come into the back door. So I just didn't want you to think that we're just that normal paranormal location. Besides people visiting us, we also have animals too, plus what's outside.
Yeah. So a couple years ago at Christmas, it was really, really mild. And Leanne and her fiance brought their either dog or dogs over. And our shepherdess and her husband and friend brought their border collies over. So there were like 5 to 7 dogs playing in the paddocks in the front of the house. And Edie, the shepherdess, was filming the dogs playing. And when we looked at the video when she was done, the dogs had been interacting with a green orb. And we don't know if it was a spirit dog or a spirit sheep, but they were definitely playing together. And one of our volunteer shepherdesses recently, last week, saw a very tall man in a black suit walking across the yard towards the main road. And she just told us about that today. And we think that might have been John Brown because he was 6 feet tall.
And as we circle back to that history that we started with, he was the shepherd here on Mutton Hill, where they had 13 to 1,500 Merino Saxony sheep, which is the largest type of sheep farm east of the Mississippi. And we'd also been previously told in the winter, when nothing is out in the front yard, what's up with all the goats in your yard? And here, if you're not familiar, Merino Saxony sheep have horns. And so it all ties back into, so it's just really a fascinating location here up on the hill with all these activities going on. We're fortunate to work here and to be welcomed here.
So the picture that Sarah shared with you was the butt print. And
yes, let's talk about the butt print.
So
gotta get to that.
This goes back a number of years, and this is Leanne's story.
So I'll try to be brief, but we had a bridezilla here once, and we never had weddings inside the house, and it was raining. And so my boss says to me, move the furniture in the front 2 rooms, and we're going to have this wedding inside. So I put the furniture all around that downstairs bedroom, which it's really gorgeous. I have to just say, it's a tiger maple bed, and it's a rope bed. I mean, it's beautiful. So I put the furniture all around the bed. This is after I just given a tour to one of our board members, his wife, and young son. So the next day, thank goodness I did not have to deal with the bridezilla. She did have her wedding outside. I had to put the furniture back. And as I'm moving the furniture, there are 2 butt prints on one side of the bed. It's like Papa Bear and Mama Bear. And then on the other side is Baby Bear. And these are rounded butt prints. And then if you pull your legs together, you know how it makes that line? This is what I saw. So I was actually pissed at this director, thinking that his family sat on the historic bed. So then next time I see him, I'm like, hey, why'd you sit on the bed? And his eyes were like saucers. He's like, you know me better than that. I wouldn't do that. And so it did happen a couple more times, but it actually had not happened again until just this year.
Well, but you guys were smoothing out the bed covers.
Yeah.
So you have to go to that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to be brief, but so this is happening. All of this occurs, by the way, after the show house. And so Allison and I, staff members, are giving all the tours. And so every day we were going in and straightening out the bed. And finally, we said what we're doing, like what's our, tradition. Like, why in the world are we straightening out the bed when we're the only ones giving the tours and people aren't allowed to get on the bed? So there's just a lot of activity. There was a sunken part in the middle where somebody's jumping on the bed. And then other times there was a punch on the bed. So there's a lot of things going on the bed, which we hadn't seen much activity of in a while until this year.
So every time we would get ready to open, I just naturally walk into that bedroom and check that bed because, it has such a reputation. And there are frequently marks on the bed, and we do smooth it out, and there's marks again. And to the point where the volunteers even check it out. Fast forward to Christmas, and our theme this year was Christmas through the decades, starting with the 1920s and coming forward to the 2020s in honor of our centennial. And we determined which decade the rooms would be based on the color of the walls and then what the most popular colors of those decades were. It just happened that this particular bedroom was going to be the 1980s because the color was this awful pink, like Pepto-Abysmal pink almost. And so...
Which is the natural color, by the way.
Yeah.
It's been dished by Sherwin-Williams. That's what color it was when the family lived there.
So anyhow, it's this, corally Pepto-Abysmal pink, and perfect for the 80s. And I designed the room, and I put this really fuzzy blanket on the bed. Before I was done with the room, I would notice that there were prints on the bed. And at one point, after I got everything done and we were ready to open, I said, I would really appreciate it if nobody sits on the bed. So for the majority of Christmas, the bed remained nice and smooth.
Okay, now I have to interject here because what you need to know, if you're not from the 80s, that besides 1,000 pillows, it also had Cabbage Patch dolls and Pound Puppies.
Yeah.
Okay, so that explains the Pound Puppies. I'll post the picture with this episode. But yeah, I couldn't figure that out too. I'm like, are Pound Puppies that historical? But okay, it makes so much more sense now because I recognize the Pound Puppies too.
All right,
Yes,
Chris,
okay.
we're old.
They are.
Apparently historical.
Well, they're 40 years old now. I guess
Oh,
they're
crikey.
but
Yeah.
Our last big event of the year was actually on January 6th. We decided that we were going to have a community open house, free for the neighborhood and, anybody who wanted to come in. And so at the end of the day, I went through the house, making sure that all the candles were off, they're LED candles, and, closed the drapes and pulled all the louvers. I specifically looked at the bed and it was smooth. So then it was Sunday and Monday, and I think I came in on Tuesday. And I went in the house to get something and went into the Perkins bedroom, and there were those big butt prints on the bed. And I took the picture and I sent it to Leanne and Riva, our other coworker, and I said, "Who's been sitting on the bed?"
And so can I ask, sorry, Sherry interrupting Anne. When you would, has anybody actually sat on the, I mean, is it like a Tempur-Pedic where it like holds the shape for a while? Or is it like, if you were to sit on it, it just kind of fluffs back? Like when those butt cheek impressions were in there, is it like somebody is actually sitting there right then that second while you're seeing it? Or is it just like one of those beds where it just holds that shape for a...
It's going to hold the shape because it actually is a feather bed. So it's a historic mattress. So once you set those feathers, they're
not going to fluff up.
Yeah.
So you actually have to physically fluff them to make those imprints go away.
Yeah.
So it could have been like somebody sat there yesterday and their butt cheeks are still there the next day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how we got here.
The infamous butt cheeks.
Yeah. And, like Leanne has said, there are other stories. We could probably go on for another hour, but
yeah, well, we would love. Yeah, these are great. I love it. I want to come to Akron now and go on a tour.
Yeah,
I want to go see this house.
All of you, and bring Sarah.
Yeah.
Well,
We will love to have you back and have you dig into more of these stories. Cause I think it's so neat. I love it. I don't think we've ever had a ghost sheep yet. This has to be the first. I've heard of ghost cats. I've heard of ghost dogs, but I mean, ghost sheep too. I mean, why not? So
well, and so before I just have one more question for the both of you. So have either of you experienced before or experienced after anything outside of the house?
Oh yeah.
So you have had experiences outside the house. Did you have it before or did you have it after you had your experiences at the house?
I see a gardener walking past my office window frequently. When I was a little kid, the parents of the caretakers lived here as well and participated in the care of the property. And I don't know if it's that elderly man, but I have frequently seen a man walking past my office window, which is on the ground floor. And I've also seen the same man when I've been outside walking up towards the what we call the carriage house.
So I have a little bit of a different experience because when we do these paranormal tours, when everyone leaves, we give them a salt necklace and talk about the fact that the spirits are not allowed to go home with them. Although we do have some volunteers that want them to go home and have told us stories about them taking them home. And so I lived down the street in a historic house and my lights were flickering a lot and just assumed it was squirrels chewing on lines, which, makes you a little nervous. But one night my daughter said to me, "Mommy, your face looks different." Obviously I'm aging or I look bad, it's like that makes you feel real good. So I put her to bed and the next morning I wake up and you need to know I love black cats and I have a black cat that I found here on the property. And so Marvin's looking at me not very nicely. And this cat who sleeps with me and adores me came at my face and it scared me. So I took my arm and I threw him. Sorry, PETA. And he was fine. When he landed, actually, I should say in midair, he's adjusting his feet. And as his feet touched the ground, he then gained momentum and came at my face again, which scared me again.
Jeez.
Get off of me, Marvin. And at that point, I just said, you're not allowed to stay here. You're going to have to leave. And no more flickering lights and no more Marvin coming at my face. So to this day, I mean, this is almost a couple decades later, my daughter will say, "Mom, did you bring your salt necklace?" Because she doesn't want me to bring anything home.
So it was like something was taking over you?
Well, it did make me think of a little horror movie. And I can't remember what she said. I think she said, "Mom, your face looks like a clown face." And I don't usually wear makeup. So I again laughed it off and just felt like obviously I'm having a bad day. But I was having a worse day than I thought. Boy, did you open up a can of worms.
I guess so. Wow. Dang me and my question.
One question I did have is have you researched to the fact that you might know who the people on the steps were, or I know you mentioned Martha never living there. Have any of either the angel readers or clairvoyants have they talked about specific people, or maybe why this seems to be a hub for lots of activity happening?
So we did do a little bit of research on Martha, but we need to do some more. And we think that she was in a relationship. And I believe that she was upset because her husband had not come through the light. And so she was wanting him to do that. So that's kind of what we gathered from the various people that have spoken to her over time. And then in regards to the family members, Laura Lynn has just shared that this space is very important to them. And we know that with where Denise lived, that was the granddaughter of the Perkins. But when the granddaughter inherited the house, she left that larger home and came to the Perkins-Stone mansion because of its prestige and the honor that was felt by the family. So we feel that they're very attached to this location. We're just honoring them. And she does feel like it's very positive. I mean, again, a few malicious things might show up, but overall it does feel like the house is being watched after. And as Denise said, interestingly, Martha would have been someone of their time period, so they all seem to be friendly.
Wow. Well, this has been so much fun, and I love to hear your stories, and we will definitely need to have you back. So continue to tell us a little bit more. And Denise and Leianne, thank you so much.
Can I say the ending line?
Oh, yes. I'm so excited.
Take it away, Mom.
Thank you for listening, and remember to keep that night light on. Good night, sweet dreams.
If you have a story to share, please send it to notyourmothersbedtimestory@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Not Your Mother's Bedtime Story. And please help us grow by following us on your favorite podcast platform, leaving us a positive review, and telling a friend. Thank you for your support.